Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great Game Master. In today's episode, we're looking at a question that came from our website, www.greatgamemaster.com. And the question is, how do you run a one-shot? Well, in the following few minutes, I'm going to give you my ideas on how to run a one-shot. And first and foremost, you need to learn how to do this. It's not the Vulcan salute, it is the count of 5. What is a one-shot? Well, a one-shot is very, very simply an adventure that's going to happen once and that the characters are not going to get used again necessarily. And the entire idea is that within a space of a few hours, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe less, an entire adventure can play out. This is not a deeply complicated adventure. There's no master plot with subplots and subplots and subplots on the subplots. This is a straightforward adventure. It is perhaps role-playing at its very core. So how do you do it, and how do you do it successfully? Well, a lot of the tools have already been provided to you in videos that I've done before. So if you don't understand concepts like the 1-2-1 method, I suggest you go and have a look at the video called, well, 1-2-1. There's that. We're talking about story. So if you don't know about someone who wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it, go and look at the story video. So it's all of those concepts. We're going to compress them, though, into a very short space of time. And that's where this comes in, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. Let's start with the idea of a one-shot. So you've got a bunch of players together, maybe they're all friends from out of town, and you've got a weekend or a Saturday afternoon free to play a game. You need to come up with a one-shot, a simple idea. The most important thing, and I've seen this happen repeatedly at conventions where basically you're playing a one-shot, people overcomplicate the story, they add in too many layers, too many historical references, too much information, and the players and their characters will never come across it because there just isn't enough time. So, start your adventure with the 1-2-1 method. Very, very simple. Introduce the plot immediately. Don't start with a preamble, you're all sitting in a bar and a stranger walks in. No. You are in the middle of battle. Roll initiative. The gunmen are chasing behind you, firing their 1940s MP40s at you, and you have nowhere to run except through that door. The starship is breaking up and the evacuate ship alarm has been sounded. You need to get to an air escape pod before it's too late. Get them into the action straight away. There's no option for players or their characters to go wandering off in different directions or to try and engage with the locals. NPC dialogue might be great. Don't fall into the trap of becoming this lyrical, philosophical NPC character. You don't have time. So jump straight into the action. Then have 2 very clear turning points. You've got your first obstacle that the guys have to overcome, then you've got your second obstacle that the guys have to overcome, and that's it. Have 2 major points that you're aiming at, and then hit them, and once you've hit them, move on. Don't overcomplicate matters. Don't obfuscate information. Don't make it so obscure that the players have to spend half an hour trying to figure out just what that NPC meant. Hit your 2 points and move on straight into the showdown. And again, don't make the showdown reliant on the fact that they've done the first obstacle and they've done the second obstacle and they've got this clue and they've got that thing. You don't want players to get stuck in a loop of, oh, we don't have the key so we can't get through the final door. Oh, we didn't push the lever over there which opened up the feather over there. Move it along. Move it along. That's the theme of a one-shot. Don't let your players sit and go, I'm not sure what should be. Then that's a failing on your story behalf, not on the player's behalf. So use the 1-2-1 to really make sure that you've got a strong, simple story. You're not running a deeply political campaign here. You're running a once-off. Make it clear and make it simple. Then, again, timing is the problem. Combat in one-shots is fine, but if you make it a 2-balanced combat where you've got basically a party of PCs versus a mirror party of PCs, a combat might last an hour. That's insane. That's a quarter of your playing time, maybe even more. Combats should be dramatic, they should be with flair, and then they should be over. It's easy. Don't drag it out. This is where I say your rules really need to be given the back seat, because you need to move it along at the speed at which you have planned. And that's the next important point. 1-2-1 helps you go, right, I've got 4 hours, I've got 1-2-1. That's how long I've got for each thing. 1 hour for the intro, 2 hours for the main bulk, and an hour for the conclusion. Or I've got 10 minutes for an intro, then I've got 60 minutes for this part, 60 minutes for that part, and then 40 minutes for that part. However your numbers work, you need to have something in your mind which says, right, I've got 20 minutes, I've got 30 minutes, I've got whatever. In my game room, and it's unfortunate, it's over there, you can't see it, I've got clocks. I make sure that there is a clock somewhere that I can see. My players cannot see it unless they go looking for it. I can see it so that I can keep track. All right, now that's fine. We were supposed to be at 15 minutes and you guys have taken 7. Sure, let me throw in a little clue from some NPC who comes wandering along and goes, oh, I overheard you talking about that. Did you know that I saw this happening 3 days ago? Then you can add in. So by then timing everything, then you can take a breather. And you can go, okay, they've got an hour to get through the swamp. And part of the obstacle that is the swamp is that there are these trees that will wrap around them and drag them under the water. And that's something that they're going to have to overcome. If they make an alliance with the wood elves that live in the area, they will show them how to avoid those trees. In which case I've got another obstacle planned. Well, I don't have it planned, I'll make it up on the fly, but at least I know I have to have an obstacle. I have to have one thing that's going to keep them there for an hour. Because remember, I'm watching that clock. So if my interaction with the wood elves takes 45 minutes because the players are being diplomatic and asking questions and trying to solve the wood elves' lifelong problems, then I know that encounter is going to be, you see a tree that comes alive and tries to eat a little party of wood elves, but they overcome it. The wounded tree now starts to move towards you, leaving the elves behind. You make 4 or 5 rounds of combat, the tree falls over dead because you've now made sure that your 15 minutes that you had left is used up. Now you move on to the second obstacle. You arrive at the exterior of this massive fortress. It spans for miles in all directions and appears to be floating above the surface of the swamp. You now know you have an hour for them to move through this castle. Is that going to be filled with traps? Is it going to be filled with guards that they've got to overcome? That's entirely up to you. But you now have the ability to control the experience. If they're taking too long with one trap because they fixated on solving it properly, well, gosh dag nabbit, that castle is no longer filled with hundreds of guards that they have to fight their way through. As a matter of fact, the guards all appear to have just died of some kind of poison. Is it in the air? Is it on the ground? If it's in the air, well, then there's pockets of it which they can identify easily and which requires them to maneuver around. Again, just buying time until my 2 hours is up and I now have to go into that showdown, which means that they plumb the depths of that fortress, and at the very heart of it they find this chamber filled with fire, and standing in the middle is this mad sorcerer who summons 12 mirror images of himself, and they all start fighting into big battle or whatever your conclusion is. Play it out. Oh, got 15 minutes left. Right, the sorcerer falls over dead, and of course you make it dramatic and feel as if the players did huge amounts of damage and he just couldn't sustain their onslaught. And of course then he dies, and then you give them some treasure because they always like treasure, and then you describe them returning triumphant to the wood elves who shout their names out and applaud them. And if you still have several minutes left, make the chieftain of the wood elves give a grand speech on how wonderful these strangers are who have come into our land and who have helped rid us of this evil. And then your time is up and you bow, and your players have all had a great time, and hopefully so have you. So that's how the 1-2-1 method works really well in terms of running a one-shot. Now, this thing. What is this thing? I've said it before in a couple of videos, and this thing is where you get to make sure that the players aren't sitting there going, I know it's my turn. I will cast that spell. Oh no, I can't cast that spell because it's the. No, never mind. No, I'm getting there. This is what are you doing? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're standing there looking like an idiot. You're overwhelmed by the scene. What are you doing? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You swing your sword because that's what you told me you were doing within that little 5-second round. Remember, combat's supposed to be between 5 and 6 seconds per turn anyway. So if in that amount of time you can't say that you swing your sword, well, then I'm sorry. You should be paying more attention to the game perhaps, or less involved in trying to find the right spell and rather just knowing your spells if you're going to be a spellcaster. So this little count of 5 allows you to keep the game going and to not necessarily slow down during combat. And it will also make it feel a lot more frenetic. In a long campaign, you don't care whether the combat takes an hour or an hour and a half or half an hour or 15 minutes, because it's just going to keep going on and on and on in perpetuity. In a one-shot, you have timing, and if you want to make it on that time without having to go, oh, well, they all die and you win, well done, that's not necessarily a satisfying conclusion. You have to keep the timing going. So don't overthink it, don't overcomplicate it, don't let the players dally, don't let the players linger. If they're starting to linger, throw in a minor combat, throw in a minor skirmish that's going to derail their little entrenched minds where they're thinking and overthinking your problems. Throw in a desperate cry for help, throw in some kind of plea, and just get it moving. Don't let them sit there. And if you haven't planned it to be as part of your adventure, well, add it. You've got a master plan. Your 1-2-1 method is still in operation. Sure, we don't need the Wood Elves now because we're running out of time because they spent too long in the introduction. So now it's not Wood Elves, it's a Wood Elf, a singular individual who will help them. So there's less time for interaction and there's no shopping opportunities and. So that is how, I'm just checking my notes because I had them quite specifically planned out. That is how you need to run a one-shot. Keep it simple, don't complicate it, don't let the players delay, keep them moving. Time yourself and make sure that your timings stay true to what you planned. Be flexible in your story, be flexible in those rules. If it says you need to make 42 rolls in order to climb across a 420-foot chasm, bollocks to that. Make them roll twice, keep it dramatic, have something attack them while they're hanging on the rope, and get them across as quickly as possible. Now, I don't want you to think that you sit there having a heart attack because you are racing to get these guys through the story. It's not a complicated story. The players are going to set their own pace. Use that to tell your story as it unfolds. You don't need this complicated maze of things. Players will get through it in their own time. And of course, something else to take into account is just how many players do you have. A one-shot with 6 players means that combat is taking 6 people's decision turns, which is 30 seconds minimum per combat round, 30 seconds minimum for them to act. And then they've still got to roll and calculate values and, which means that, arguably, you might be taking up to 3 minutes per single combat round to get through that combat. So if your combat's going to take 10 minutes, well, there's 10 rounds. That's a long time that's already been burned for a single combat. Does it really mean that you have to stick to the hit point values and that kind of thing? I don't think so. I hope this has been valuable in how to run a one-shot. Another video that I'm looking at doing is how to interpret a convention module so that you can, when handed this gigantic book that says this is a module to be run in 3 hours, interpret it and then make it run in actually 3 hours, regardless of what the author might have intended. On the other hand, how to take a single sheet of paper and to run that into a 3-hour adventure as well. So look out for that video in the far future, or maybe in the near future. Let me know in the comments below whether you want to see it next or not. Until then, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, join us on www.greatgamemaster.com to leave more questions and comments, and of course, we will see you next week, hopefully. And until then, I wish you and your fellow players happy gaming.